service and sharing, to open themselves to service and sharing, to live simply, to respect all life, and to act for justice and peace by nonviolent means. So we have two very important pluses in our situation here. We have an astute individual who's been with Gandhi, who's rather charismatic. He was a cool guy to meet, actually. He's sitting there with his sheep's wool rough-hewn thing in San Francisco and his big white beard. He was cool. I really liked him. And you have his expertise, but it's a sort of gentle expertise, which is politically okay. It's PC. And you have a community where people have been practicing the future and the means by which the future is going to be built. So these are two huge pluses. And the minute he enters on the scene, people who have been holding back in their protest because something in them says that getting down your old hunting rifle and going against the French army is neither strategic nor principled, and they're hesitating, they don't know how to join the movement. The minute it becomes nonviolent under his direction, the ranks swell. You have a lot more people. In March of 1972, 109 farmers who had been threatened with a imminent expulsion got together, and 103 out of the 109, which is better numbers than Gandhi ever got, I think, but who's counting? 103 out of 109 swore that they will never sell or alienate their land. Okay? So probably you're dealing with a mix of motives here that are partly excellent, partly selfless, partly looking to the big picture, and partly just sticking up for oneself, because farmers do not like to lose their land. They feel that their land is part of them, and they can't just get up and truck somewhere else. It's particularly agonizingly true in many parts of the less developed world, but it's even true in West Marin County, where I live. It's a highly developed area. My criterion is they have lattes. And yet, when one of the supervisors wanted to take some land and put it in, actually it was ridiculous, they wanted to put it into agriculture in perpetuity, take it away from the ownership of the farmers got all upset and said, who's going to feed you if you take away our land from the farmers? Well, the fact is, they hadn't produced an ounce of food in about 47 years. They just didn't want to lose their land. So, and another issue was the provincialism. Your southern French person, who's a very, very warm, accommodating, friendly person, is also very suspicious of foreigners. And these were the days of NATO, and a lot of these French farmers down there were saying, I will die before one Englishman sets foot on my soil. So they're kind of funny from our perspective. So, but I do think we have a mix of these personal motives and the bigger picture and understanding that they are somewhat connected. And they formed an organization for the campaign, which was a very good idea. And Lanza del Vasto, armed with these 103 farmers, starts to introduce concepts of nonviolent action in a very systematic way. In April of 1972, April 2nd and 3rd, they declared an action and invited people to come and join them, and it turned into what they call Days of Joy, les jours de joie. See, the French would be pretty good at something like this. And thousands of people came from all over France. A lot of them were, it's sort of a new phenomenon now, nonviolence tourism. You've heard of ecotourism? This is satyagraha tourism, where people come to sort of see what's going on and get a flavor for it. And the headquarters in the community sends out lots and lots of posters and collects signatures, and for the next few months, there's just waves of resistance spreading throughout the country. Now, the first major demonstration, action, occurs on July 14th. Pourquoi? Why July 14th? Yes, it's, of course, French Independence Day. And what they did was march to Rodez, which is the capital city of the department, and the bishopric, and 20,000 people are on this march, and a whole bunch of tractors. People, tractors, and sheep are going to become the key players for the next phase of the satyagraha. And it prompted the prefecture of the department to begin an inquiry into what he's calling public use of the land. Public use meaning being taken over by the military. And in October, they do their first public appeal by way of what you saw referred to as nonviolence of the deed. 5 farmers and 60 sheep drove to the Eiffel Tower, and the farmers started to pasture their sheep on the grass around the Eiffel Tower. And I actually remember seeing pictures of this in the newspapers. The police arrived and ordered the sheep to get into paddy wagons. The sheep being sheep, ils n'obéissent pas. They did not obey. And this leads to 2 hours of discussion. You can just imagine the amount of press coverage. You hear the gendarmes trying to round up the sheep, but they only obey the farmers and their own dogs. It was a terrific ploy. I mean, it was one of these staged symbolic actions that we've been reading about, which was very, very successful. So after 2 hours of discussion and much press coverage, the farmers were escorted to the outskirts of the city. And one thing that stays in everybody's mind, and it's going to be very important, and you will immediately understand why, is the discipline. Even the sheep would only obey the lead sheep. But more seriously, it was non-disruptive, not impolite. It was very well disciplined, planned, and carried out. And this immediately conveys a message to the people that we are not talking about Danny the Red running through the streets of Paris, digging up the cobblestones from the street and throwing them through the windows of the police station. Right? Now, I don't know, maybe you have no objection to this sort of thing. I don't know where I stand on it, but for the average French citoyen, the French person, this spelled chaos and disruption. And what these farmers were doing was very, very different. And there's a big tilt as a result of this demonstration to give them favor in the eyes of the public. Nonetheless, despite all of this, at the end of that year, 72, the prefecture, that is the regional government, decides that they can take the land after all. The military can take the land. And given your sense of the dynamics of what's going on here, what do you think will be the result? Catherine? No. So you sort of see what I'm leading up to. You have the people are doing their thing very well, step by step. They're building it up step by step. They're staying on track. So the law of reprogression, that's right, the law of progression is probably happening. The police and the government start to feel pressured. So they overreact. What's going to happen? Paradox of repression is clearly, if they would ever ask us, which they never do, hello, are you out there? They never ask us. This is totally predictable. And that's exactly what happened. So the imagination is all on the side of the protesters. And so what's now actually going on is that even though it was the government that started it with their atrocity, we're going to hugely expand this military base, run you people off, no more Roquefort cheese for the good people of San Francisco, they started it and defined the issue, but what you'll see is that the protesters under Lanza del Vasto's direction are taking the initiative. So they're being proactive in crafting the way that the government is going to have to confront them, and that means that they're setting the government up for a paradox of repression dynamic. Next year in January, after careful preparation and many, many, many road signs and placards, 26 tractors head for Paris. There's a convoy. The police surrounded the tractors during the night of the 11th of January at Orléans, where Joan of Arc crowned the Dauphin, the King of France. And so what did the farmers decide to do? The tractors were immobilized. They decided we will walk the rest of the way. This is firmeza permanente. This is very nonviolent response. I've gone on record as saying that if you launch some kind of nonviolent action, you want to either carry it to a win-win confrontation where if they repress you and stop you, they will be the worse for it because they will look bad in the eyes of the reference publics, or you want to make sure you can carry this thing on to the end. Because if you start something and they stop you, you're going to lose momentum and you're going to display an apparent weakness in nonviolence. It's harsh to say that, but I'm thinking particularly of there was a besieged city in Kosovo in the early 90s, and people in there were starving. The city was called Drenica, and people from Pristina and elsewhere, the women, decided to bake bread and take it to Drenica. So this is everything going for them. It's women, they're your best nonviolent warriors. It's bread, which is very concrete but also symbolic. They're taking it to starving people, so you have to be pretty inhumane to stop them. Everything's going for them. But on the road to Drenica, they encountered a line of police, and they turned around and walked back. And now there were some people who were talking to us at that time. We said, you shouldn't have turned back. And they said, well, you don't know what the Serb policemen are like. And then our attitude was, then you shouldn't have gone. Much better not to do it than to try and see if the opponent will cave in. And if he or she doesn't, then you go back. I realize this is very harsh to say that. I'm sitting here in this comfortable community surrounded by lattes, and I'm telling people they should go get their head beat in. But I'm not exactly saying that. I'm just saying that wait until you're really, really ready to do this before you do it. If you're not ready, I bet you can find something else that you are ready for until you build up the courage and strength and the wisdom to do the all or nothing thing. So the timing of this is very important. So that's why I think it's just super that they get off the tractors and proceed walking to Paris. And it's like the Salt March down to the sea, and it's like that famous sequence in Viva Zapata. I don't know if you all saw that movie. See, in my day, there was like maybe 5 movies a year that you really consider seeing. So you saw all the good ones. And if Marlon Brando was in them, you definitely saw all of them. And Viva Zapata was a tremendous movie. And there was a scene in there where they arrest him and they're taking him down to, I guess, the capital of the state. And peasants start coming out of the forest to join him. By the time he gets down there, they turn around to untie him, and there's tens of thousands of people as far as the eye can see. So this march on Paris in January of '73 starts taking on that character. And then another thing happens, and again, this is a point where I'm going to pause and give you a significant look, and you're going to shoot your hands up and compete for telling us why this is important and what the technical term is called. Okay, here's your clue. Tick, 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 tick. They founded the APAL, or League for the Development of Larzac. That would be Accueil pour, I don't know exactly what it stands for in French. And they decide that they're not just a protest movement, but if you look at the educational system in the district, the government has been neglecting it. The schools are not very good. They're going to build schools. They're going to build all kinds of handicraft leagues and things like that. Okay, start waving your hands wildly. Yes, Zoe. Yes. So I hope you don't feel I'm treating you like a little bit like a puppet, but in your responses to the bringing down a dictator, I thought that was very, very good. I really like the way you're catching on to seeing the basic principles in the individual activities. So here you suddenly have something which the government would have no purchase on. They can't go in there and say, you cannot have a league that builds schools. I don't want you having meetings, things like that. They cannot touch it. It's non-confrontational. But the fact is, you and I know that they're building up much greater strength for the next protest, if they have to have one. So I'm not going to be able to quite finish this, but that's okay. We'll carry on until next time. In April of '73, more than 50 farmers returned their papiers militaires, their military service papers. Every red-blooded French male is issued these service papers, which start the process of your induction into the military, and here they actually take their papers and hand them in. So what's the new element here? This is a little bit subtler than my constructor program thing, but I think you ought to spot it. I will give you a hint. Yeah, no? This is civil disobedience, right? This is not against the law to get into your tractor and drive to Paris. It's a pain in the butt, and it slows down the traffic. But there's no law that says you can't drive on the public road with your tractor. There's no law that says you cannot pasture your sheep at the Champs-Élysées. But there is a law that says you cannot hand back your papers. It's very much like the Hamad Billah Mask in South Africa when they burned their passes. And you remember in the movie, someone saying those passes are government property. You can't destroy them. It's on this occasion where one of these French farmers says, "No English soldier here on my land." But more seriously, he said, "This is what I fought for in World War II. This freedom that you're now taking away from me." So I'll stop here for, I'm going to go a little bit further. In August, again, we're still in 1973, there's a mass demonstration in Larzac, and it is participated in by farmers, of course, and students and intellectuals. And I would imagine that some of the students were intellectuals. And some of the intellectuals may still have been students. But this is significant for what reason? I don't know that I quite have a technical term for this one. Maybe we should come up with one. But Marcella? Right. You're going to different sectors, right, which is where the traditional left kind of failed in the 30s because they stood up for workers' rights. And there was this whole new class of haute bourgeoisie, of upper bourgeois echelons who were not factory workers. These are the people who would go on to found Hewlett-Packard and things like that. And so the kind of appeal and the kind of issues that the laborers were striking for were restricted to their community. But here they're starting to touch on a chord which is bringing in other elements of the civilization. It's much more important than just more people. It means that there must be some basic issue involved. These people are not just struggling for their own rights, for their own advantages. And you remember the moment when that happens in Gandhi's career. Remember that from Act 164A? And again, it's not unlike this thing here, that in the sense that they didn't plan for it. They didn't go to the universities and say, we got to have students. It just had broader appeal. Alex, do you remember?
When the British said that anywhere doesn't work out, they got the women.
That's right. And then the women shortly got the laborers involved who had not been involved before. So it's going in the opposite direction now, which is kind of interesting, that you have the indigenous people and the farmers who spread their resistance to other sectors of the society. Okay. Well, I'm going to stop here in terms of going through the story, but let me just give you a preview, okay, preview of coming attractions, because I go to movies and I know you're supposed to do this. The reason that I have chosen this Satyagraha is partly because of its typicality in the way that it picked one issue, which may have seemed pretty local, but eventually ended up going to the heart of the big struggle, called globalism or whatever we call it. It was typical in that regard. Typical in that it started with a local indigenous affected group. Maybe not so typical, unfortunately, we wish this would happen more, but it does happen some, in that it had an expert who came from the outside to play a very critical role, and that you had a community already built to do this. Those things were not typical. Another important, I can't leave you hanging here in suspense. They won. In 1981, the army had to back down. So that's where we're going to go next time, and then we'll talk about some of the other reform movements that you have in your reader.